Diabetes is expensive. Whether you are a type 1 diabetic or a type 2 diabetic, whether you're gestational diabetic or pre-diabetic, just in general, diabetes, like most disorders in this world, are extremely expensive. And I don't see it getting any better anytime soon. If you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Olivia and I'm a type 1 diabetic and have been so for about 20 years now. Or if you're coming back to my channel, welcome back. Today, I thought I would discuss with you guys a few ways that I have found that I can save money in my own personal life on diabetic equipment, supplies, food, all that good stuff. And I wanted to share that with you guys on YouTube, so maybe it would benefit some others out there. Because as stated in the beginning of this video, diabetes is very expensive. So to start off, before I get into the nitty gritty of how we can save some cash, I wanted to go over some stats. And my stats are from the ADA, so American Diabetic Association, as per a few years ago. So in 2022, diabetes costed $307 billion. Now that is not just on insulin, that is on people who needed healthcare, people who needed to stay in facilities, diabetic equipment, diabetic supplies, all of that stuff. In total, the world paid $307 billion on diabetic supplies. So outpatient facilities, doctor's appointments, lab work, blah, 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 all that stuff. $307 billion. I think it's a pretty reasonable number considering the fact that, no, it's not reasonable. That's crazy. It's actually crazy. $307 billion just for diabetics. Another statistic is that a diabetic person is estimated to spend 2.6 times the amount on their health as a person without diabetes. Now, anyone with diabetes can attest that it's kind of unfair when you think of it that way, because we didn't necessarily choose to be diabetic, but we have to pay the price of being diabetic to stay alive, because you can't not take your medicine. You can't just walk around and pretend that nothing is wrong. So 2.6 times the amount of someone who's non-diabetic. And last, between 2017 and 2022, the cost of insulin rose 24%. 24%. So I'm assuming prices are going to keep hiking up and up and up. But even though those stats really were kind of irrelevant because everyone knows how expensive the world is today, I wanted to share that with you guys just because it's very interesting when you think about the fact that me and all of my diabetic peers in the world have spent $307 billion in 2022. It's kind of mind-boggling, but let's get right into it with a few different tips and tricks that I've used in my life to save some money on diabetes. I hope you guys can find some of these tips helpful. Maybe you knew of them, maybe you didn't know of them, but regardless, thank you for checking me out today. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you haven't already, and I will see you at the end of the video. Let's get into it. Okay, so my tip number one is to call your health insurance, which sounds like a very obvious tip. But a few years ago, I'll tell you a little backstory as to how this saved me some money. So a few years ago, I was at a work function and I was talking to another diabetic, a type 2 diabetic, about the cost of insulin, the cost of health insurance, and all of that. And he said, "Oh, you see this nice new Fitbit I'm wearing? Well, I was actually given this from our health insurance because I'm a diabetic." And my jaw was on the floor. I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I called my health insurance. I showed them my A1Cs, and for the improvement in my blood sugars, they gave me a Fitbit." And my jaw was on the floor. I was drooling in amazement. I was like, health insurance don't just give things free away, but they do, because I then called and I talked to them, and the Fitbit was an option, and I opted for a $100 gift card. If I showed them 2 A1Cs below a certain range, they sent me a $100 gift card that I could use at any CVS location towards prescriptions, which was huge. So I went down the rabbit hole and I started looking into all these other incentive programs offered through my health insurance. So when I was pregnant, I got a ton of free things when I was pregnant. Diabetes, I got a ton of things because I was diabetic. I get gift cards for submitting my A1Cs through them. And now currently me and my husband are under a new plan this year. And the first thing I did in January when we switched over was I called to find out about their incentive programs so that way I could get involved to get some gift cards and some value to this program. I mean, we're not spending just a few pennies a paycheck on health insurance. Health insurance is not cheap. So call your health insurance and get everything out of it that you can. So far already, I've received $75 in gift cards towards CVS for just submitting a questionnaire and submitting my A1C results. That is pretty good for it being only February that I've received $75 in incentives already. So that's a little backstory, and it's something I do every year to help me out with the cost of diabetes because my prescriptions are not cheap, but when I get gift cards, I can put that towards my prescriptions to kind of offset how expensive it is. So, yes, call your health insurance. My next piece of advice is to check your manufacturer's websites for the insulins and medications you take. So, just like my last point, I'm going to start with a story on how this example saved me some money. So I recently got the Omnipod. If you haven't seen my videos already about it, I'm on the Omnipod 5 and the Dexcom G7. So when I first had my doctor write out the prescription for Omnipod, she ordered me pods and she ordered me the 90-day introductory package for Omnipod. And I checked my insurance and they both cost $125. So I went on to Omnipod's website and I found that you could get an introduction kit for free. So that would be $125 less, clearly, because they were willing to pay for that. So what I did was had my doctor contact Omnipod, call in the prescription through them, and I got my free kit through Omnipod to get started. And then I paid for the pods, but $125 saved by having my doctor just send the prescription to Omnipod versus going through my traditional CVS pharmacy. So I know that other websites can do the same thing. I was on Novolog before and Lantus, and I remember contacting them similarly, and they would give me coupons to take money off that prescription. Especially when you're first starting on a medication, a company is very willing to work with you on lowering the cost to get you to try it. So first off, if you're getting on Omnipod, make sure you check out their website. And I believe same thing for Dexcom, because Dexcom also has a similar setup where you pay for a kit and the pods, and you might get lucky and save a ton of cash that way. So make sure you check out all your websites and manufacturer websites for the medications you take. My next key tip is to reevaluate your diet and your exercise in your life. So as a diabetic, a lot of our life revolves around what we eat and how we do it, how we exercise, how we live our life. So basically, I'm sure everyone watching this video already knows, but the more you eat, the more insulin you have to take. The more carbs you eat, the more insulin you have to take. The more you exercise, the less insulin you have to take. And that can be very beneficial when you know how diabetes works in saving you money. So just like all my other points, I'm going to tell you a little story. So back at the start of COVID, I got laid off from my job. I worked in hotel management. And with that, I knew I was losing my health insurance because the start of COVID, it was pretty obvious that we probably were not going to be working for quite some time. So I was losing my health insurance, losing my job. I knew I wasn't going to have a good amount of money for quite some time, but I'm diabetic. I need my medication. So what I actually started doing, which as a preface, talk to your doctor first before you do anything. This is just my personal story and what I did to help me save some money. So first off, I got medication, for COVID, but I wanted to make it last. So what I did was I started eating extremely low carb and I evolved into a ketogenic lifestyle. And during that lifestyle, I actually required little to no insulin at all. Even with long-acting insulin, I was eating so little carb, I did not have to take any medication for what I was eating. Now it was a very involving diet. It was a hard diet to stay on top of because if you aren't familiar with the keto diet, it's a very high fat, low carb diet. So I believe, if I could remember, 12 less than 12% of what you eat in a day are carbs. And typically those carbs are like the healthy carbs, like you'd find in vegetables. So you couldn't eat fruit, you couldn't eat bread or pasta clearly. You were basically subject to eating high fat. So a lot of eggs, a lot of bacon, a lot of meat, a lot of high fat dairy. And that's the diet I followed while COVID was going on to keep my insulin cost very low. Because while I was on that diet, I did not have to worry about purchasing more insulin because my insulin that was supposed to last me 3 months lasted me over a year on the ketogenic diet. So that was huge. But like I said, I'm not here pushing the keto diet or a low carb diet for you. I'm just saying that in a pinch, when I needed to make sure my insulin would last me, I changed my diet and lifestyle to make it work for me. Also, another thing I do now as a mom is whenever I eat a meal, when I eat breakfast, lunch, I try to do something very active after. So I'm a big person who likes to walk with my kids outside. So after lunch every day, I put them in the stroller and we go for a stroll. And just walking after we eat helps reduce that spike in my blood sugar and really helps me out. So if you want to save some money on diabetes, I know that changing your diet and you're exercising more is not for everyone, but it's an option. So just consider it. Just consider it. And my last tip of them all is probably one I should have started in the beginning of the video because it's the most important, is to talk to your doctor. So your doctor wants you to be as healthy as humanly possible. They want to work with you to make sure that you're making the best decisions for your body and for your life. And they are going to work with you to get you there. So if you have a prescription of insulin that's too high or a medication costs too much money and you can't afford it, I know that it takes a lot of, it takes a humble person to be able to admit that you can't afford it or that you cannot make it work. But just open up to them and let them know, because you will not be able to find a doctor who will say, oh, you can't afford that insulin? Well, then just don't take it. Just don't take any insulin. There's no doctor that's ever going to say that. Every doctor is going to work with you to try to find you a medication that suits your lifestyle best. So even if it involves switching medications, I know this, which is also another tip, but not really a tip, but I know that Walmart has an insulin that they sell that's extremely low priced, as well as blood test strips. I know when I was in college, my test strips were insanely expensive. I want to say it was like $200 for a month's supply of test strips. And I went to my doctor and I said, I can't swing this. I would have to wait so many tables just for test strips that it was unbelievable. And she said, you know what, Olivia, go to Walmart and you can get Walmart brand test strips. They have their own meters and their own test strips and their own glucose tablets and their whole line of products for diabetics that are insanely cheap. I remember I went from the $200 a month to paying, I want to say it was $25 for 100 test strips. $25 for test strips, which was crazy cheap. And before then, I did not know that Walmart catered to the diabetics like that and had those products that you didn't have to go through a pharmacy. And you don't even have to go to a pharmacist. You walk into Walmart and it's all right there. Now, insulin, I'm almost 100% positive you do obviously have to go through a pharmacist, but the point of my story is if you're really in a pinch, check Walmart out. But also make sure you talk to your doctor, because generic prescriptions are available and there's other options out there for if you can't afford it. But beyond your doctor, you could also reach out to different diabetic organizations about getting some extra help, like the ADA, JDRF, all of those good ones. It's never hurts. So I know this video was probably filled with a lot of facts that most of you already know, but I think it's worth a shot. And anything to save money in this world. We are in 2025 and things are not cheap. Food is insanely expensive. Eggs are just so expensive, it's actually unbelievable. Everything costs a lot, and especially when you're a diabetic and you have to basically pay just to breathe air because you require so many more things than a normal person. Like I said, 2.6 times the amount of medical expenses if you're diabetic. You think about it, we're paying for insulin, we're paying for our glucose monitors, we're paying for the special diabetic foods, the luxuries. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to be out there eating a crazy expensive diabetic diet. You can make it work on a budget, being diabetic. What options do we have other than that? But I hope that you guys found this video useful. If you guys have any great money-saving diabetic tips, leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear them. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.